Without fail, every video containing an RTX 3080 is filled with comments about its stock levels or lack thereof, because everybody is hyped about these. It is pretty easy to see why. These are incredible cards that actually seem to deliver plausibly decent value for money, which is something we haven't necessarily seen from Nvidia in a generation or two. Now, the thing is, a lot of people clearly want these, that's why they're in such high demand, but do you need one? Well, I've got a collection of older cards, or last-gen cards, including from a GTX 1070 all the way up to a 2080 Ti, so let's test them out, let's see if at the different resolutions it might be worth picking a 3080 up instead of one of these older cards, or just sticking with what you've got. So let's take a look. But first, if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more videos like this one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The obvious answer is no. You don't need an RTX 3080, although there are a number of use cases that it might make sense for you to want one more and be more likely to actually pick one up. Let's take a look, starting at 1080p. Now, if you are gaming at 1080p on even a 144Hz monitor, odds are you don't really need anything above a RTX 2070 Super, maybe 2080, because those cards can very capably hit the 144 FPS mark, even on higher ultra settings, without much of a problem, and they're pretty consistent at it. If you're planning on gaming at 240 or 360 Hz and you're not necessarily willing to turn the settings all the way down, then it might make more sense to pick up one of these higher tier cards like a 3080. But anyway, let's take a look at some benchmark results. Now, starting as always with Battlefield 5, I'm testing on the Ryzen 9 3900X at ultra settings for all of these results. Now, Battlefield 5 has an FPS cap of 200 and the 3080 pretty much just sits at it. It's a very nice playing experience, and while the 1% lows are a little off here, it was a good experience nonetheless. The 2080 Ti is also a great experience at 177 FPS average, and then there's a fairly large jump down to the 2080 at 141, the 2070 at 121, and then the 1070 at 82. It's a very similar graph for COD Modern Warfare, where the 3080 has a sizable lead, the 2080 Ti is doing pretty well at 176, and then there's a big jump down to 2080, a small jump to 2070, and then a bigger one to the 1070. The thing is that if you have a 1070 or something in that region, GTX 980 for example, then you're going to have a very good time with pretty much any of these cards if you're planning on upgrading. Even swapping to a 2080, you're looking at, even on ultra settings, or in Fortnite's case, epic settings, you're looking at 141 FPS average, which is a decent improvement, especially if you are running a 144Hz monitor, for example. Of course, if you're playing with higher refresh rate monitors, then the higher end cards, 2080 and above, might be more suited to you. Of course, you can turn the settings down and get a lot more performance, but either way, any of these cards make for a great experience. At 1440p, again, assuming you are a ultra settings gamer only, then you will probably want to step up to the 2080 Ti's and 3080s of the world if you want a locked 144 FPS at 1440p. Of course, you can always turn the settings down, and even a GTX 1070 is still good enough for 1440p gameplay, especially if you're willing to turn some settings down. So for the vast majority of people, I wouldn't worry about it, but if you are that ultra settings fanatic, then they might make some more sense. Let's take a look at the benchmark numbers. So again, starting off with Battlefield 5 and again at ultra settings, you can see that the gap between the 3080 and the 2080 Ti, at least for Battlefield 5, is a fair bit closer. When it comes to the gap between the 2080 Ti and the 2080 though, that is a chasm. It's a massive, massive difference, and it's a fairly stable step down from there. The fun thing is that with the 1070, it's not too far off getting 3 times more performance if you're to upgrade to a 3080. It does cost a hell of a lot more money, but that is a lot more performance. And taking a look at COD Modern Warfare, like looking at 2070, if you're to upgrade to the 3080, you're almost getting 2x performance there too, which is kind of incredible. Across the board, these are all still pretty playable experiences. Obviously, the 1070 at 64 FPS average is on the lower side, especially if you want to do high refresh rates, but of course this is at ultra settings. You can always turn it down if you want to, with the main exception being ray tracing, which is now in all of these games, but is also not something that I personally turn on, and I know many people do, so if you do, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, but it's a fairly similar story for Fortnite. There's a bigger gap between the 3080 and the 2080 Ti, and still a pretty big gap between the 2080 Ti and the 2080, but fairly standard across the board. And yeah, there's a pretty big difference between going from that sort of 2070, 1070 up to the higher end cards. And 4K, again, assuming you are an ultra settings gamer, then yeah, especially if you want to play at higher refresh rates and you're an absolute baller, then yeah, a 3080 or dare I say a 3090 are going to be your best bets. If you're willing to play at 4K 60, and especially if you're willing to turn some settings down, then even an RTX 2070 Super, so you're looking at RX 5700 XT or GTX 1080, 1080 Ti, are all going to be suitable enough options, at least for the time being. Either way, let's take a look at those benchmark numbers. And finally, we have 4K. Now, of course, all of these FPS numbers are a lot lower than the rest of them, and if you look at the 1070, it's not a great experience. It was 35 FPS average and a 1% low of just 18. Really not kind of designed for this. Of course, this is 4K ultra testing still, but to give you a comparison, the 3080 was getting 98 FPS average and having a 1% low of 85, which is just absolutely incredible. COD Modern Warfare is a fairly similar story. It's a little bit better for the lower end cards, but even in the mid-range, you're looking at fairly capable 65 FPS average from the 2080 and 52 from the 2070. But of course, like I said, this is at ultra settings, so if you do want to turn those settings down and get a bit more of a performance boost, then that is certainly possible. But if you do want a monster ultra settings, the 2080 Ti at 83 FPS and the 3080 96 are both very playable. One interesting thing here is that 4K seems to let the 3080 stretch its legs the most, as the performance delta between the 3080 and the 2080 Ti is at its maximum here. It's actually pretty massive and honestly makes the lower end cards kind of dwarf by comparison, but yeah, if you've got something like a 1080 or 2070 and you're gaming at 4K, first of all, I'm kind of surprised, but second, a 3080 could be a worthwhile upgrade. What's interesting is that if you've got a GTX 1080 and you're planning on upgrading to a 3080, you're looking at pretty much 2 times the performance at 1080p or almost 3 times the performance at both 1440p and 4K. Albeit for around 4 times the price of what your card is currently worth, it's definitely a sizable upgrade, but also an expensive one. If you have a 2070 or 2070 Super, then especially if you're playing at say 1440p, it could be worth the upgrades to a 3080 if, like I said, you're an ultra settings gamer. If you're willing to turn a few settings down, then at 1440p, a 2070 or 2070 Super are still going to be fantastic cards and are going to deliver certainly enough performance for the time being and enough for you to wait out the stock shortages with the 3080. And any cards above that, so 2080, 2080 Super, 2080 Ti, those sorts of cards, you really don't need a 3080. You really won't see a sizable performance improvement, and certainly one that you couldn't achieve by just turning a couple of settings down. And of course, there are other resolutions like the ultra-wide resolutions that might benefit a little bit more, but across the board, yeah, it's unlikely that you're actually going to need a 3080, at least right now anyway. For me, the way I upgrade my PC is if I notice a problem, I'll look to solve it. But until that point, I pretty much just leave it alone. If I notice that games are lagging, low FPS while playing, then yeah, I'm gonna probably turn some settings down, but eventually I'm gonna be looking to upgrade my graphics card. But until that point, there's not going to be a massive difference between me upgrading from a 1080 Ti to a 3080 in terms of my actual gaming experience. I don't play games at the lowest settings, they're all still running at 90 to 120 FPS, and on my 1440p 144Hz monitor, I'm not really noticing that difference, so yeah, I don't need to. I'm not after frivolous upgrades, and in general, that's what I would recommend to you, I guess. for the majority of people, you can kind of rest assured that no, you don't need a 3080, and you might not even see all that much benefit for having one. Of course, there are plenty of use cases where you will want a 3080. There are a lot of people who are still rocking 9 or 7 series NVIDIA cards that are finally looking to upgrade, and for you guys, yeah, it makes sense. If you want to make one purchase that's going to last for another 5 years, then that seems like a decent shout. But of course, the 3070 is coming out very shortly, and if you're interested in seeing this lineup compared to a 3070 and see if it's worth getting that instead, do hit that subscribe button and let me know in a comment down below. So with all of that said, those are my thoughts on the benchmark results, and I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. Do you think you need a 3080? If you do, feel free to let me know what your use case is, and if you're worried about the stock levels, then don't worry, there's already 600 comments down below that have already addressed that issue. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to hit that subscribe button, like I said, for more videos like this one, and I'm going to leave links to 3080s and some of the other cards in the description down below, which will be Amazon affiliate links that will take you to the local Amazon store, where you can probably not see pricing, at least for this right now, but maybe for some of the other cards. So feel free to take a look. Otherwise, there is a whole load of other links in the description you can check out, from Overclock's UK affiliate links if you're buying from there. There's merch, hoodies, or t-shirts like this one. There's the Patreon, where you can get cool rewards like access to our Money Men Discord chats and ad-free or sponsor-free videos when those come out. And otherwise, that's pretty much it. Feel free to check out some more videos over there, including the 3080 build guide that I did with this card. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to let me know any questions you have in the comments down below. We'll see you all in the next video.